Captain Sarah Chen had seen many strange things during her 15 years exploring the Outer Rim territories, but nothing had prepared her for the sight that greeted her crew when they answered the distress beacon from the abandoned research station orbiting Kepler 442b. The station hung dead in space, its solar panels twisted and corroded, hull breached in multiple places. What should have been a routine salvage operation turned into something far more extraordinary when they detected massive life signs emanating from the station's central habitat ring. "Captain, these readings don't make sense," muttered Lieutenant Rodriguez, his fingers dancing across the scanner controls. "Whatever's in there is huge, and it's been there for a very long time. The biosignatures suggest it's been dormant for decades, maybe longer." Sarah adjusted her environmental suit and checked her weapon one final time. The Wanderer's Hope had docked with the station without incident, but something about this place felt wrong. The air recyclers had long since failed, leaving the corridors filled with a thick, musty atmosphere that their suits' filters struggled to process. As they moved deeper into the station, the smell grew stronger. It wasn't just the usual decay of an abandoned facility. This was something organic, something alive that had been festering for far too long. The walls were covered in a strange, iridescent scale-like substance that seemed to shift and shimmer in their helmet lights. "Jesus, what is that stench?" gagged Engineer Patel over the comm system. "It's like something died and has been rotting for years." The team reached the central habitat dome, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Through the reinforced, transparent aluminum viewing port, she could see into a vast chamber that had once been designed as a garden ecosystem for the research station's crew. Instead, it had become a lair. Coiled in the center of the space was a creature unlike anything in the xenobiological databases. It was massive, easily 100 meters from snout to tail, with 6 powerful limbs and wings that were folded tight against its serpentine body. But it was the creature's coloration that made Sarah's heart race with recognition and disbelief. The dragon, for there was no other word that could describe what lay before them, was pure white, its scales having an almost translucent quality that seemed to glow faintly in the dim emergency lighting. This wasn't just any alien creature. This was one of the eternal worms, the ancient beings that had once ruled vast swaths of the galaxy before mysteriously disappearing millennia ago. But something was terribly wrong with this magnificent creature. Its usually pristine white scales were dulled and tarnished, covered in layers of shed skin, dried bodily fluids, and what appeared to be centuries of accumulated filth. The creature's breathing was labored, and even from their position outside the chamber, Sarah could see that its eyes, though open, were clouded and dim. "My God," whispered Dr. Martinez, the team's xenobiologist. "Do you know what this is? This creature is older than human civilization. The eternal worms were already ancient when the first galactic civilizations rose to power. They were said to be immortal, beings of pure energy and matter who could reshape reality with their thoughts." Sarah studied the creature more carefully. Despite its obvious distress, there was an intelligence in those clouded eyes that seemed to be watching them. The dragon's massive head turned slightly, tracking their movement through the viewing port. And for a moment, Sarah felt as though she was being evaluated by a mind that had witnessed the birth and death of stars. "Look at its condition," Dr. Martinez continued, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and concern. "Eternal worms are supposed to be self-maintaining beings. They don't age, they don't decay, they don't get sick. But this one, it's like it's given up on existing." The dragon's mental voice suddenly echoed through their minds, bypassing their communication systems entirely. The telepathic contact was weak, fragmented, like trying to tune into a distant radio station through heavy static. "So tired. So very tired. Cannot remember when last I moved, when last I cared enough to tend to this failing shell." Sarah stepped closer to the viewing port, her hand pressed against the cool surface. "Can you hear us? We're here to help." "Help?" The mental voice carried a note of bitter amusement. "Little flesh creatures with your brief sparks of life. What could you possibly offer one who has seen the universe grow cold and distant? I am Zephyrian the Eternal, and I have watched civilizations rise from primordial ooze only to return to cosmic dust. I have seen stars born and die, watched galaxies collide and merge. What meaning could your help possibly have?" The crew exchanged glances through their helmet visors. They were in the presence of a being that predated their species by millions of years, a creature whose existence spanned geological ages. Yet here it lay, wallowing in its own neglect, apparently having lost the will to maintain even the most basic aspects of its physical form. "How long have you been here?" Sarah asked gently. "Time. Time has no meaning when you cannot die. This station, I came here when your kind first began to walk upright on your little blue world. The researchers found me drifting in the void, drawn by their curiosity about the old stories. They built this place around me, studied me, tried to understand what I am. But they aged and died, as your kind does, and I remained. Others came, asked their questions, made their observations, and they too passed into memory." The dragon's massive head shifted, and one enormous eye fixed directly on Sarah. "The last of your researchers left this place 3,000 of your years ago. Since then, I have simply existed. What point is there in maintaining this shell when existence itself has become nothing but an endless repetition of cosmic emptiness?" Sarah felt a profound sadness wash over her. This wasn't just an alien creature in distress. This was a being suffering from a form of existential depression that spanned millennia. The eternal worm had literally given up on life, even though death was apparently not an option for its kind. 3,000 years, she murmured to her team. It's been lying here in its own filth for 3,000 years. Engineer Patel's voice cracked slightly. "Captain, look at the environmental readings from inside that chamber. The air composition is toxic. The surfaces are covered in organic waste and shed biological matter. If this creature has been motionless for 3 millennia, the buildup of everything, it must be incredible." Dr. Martinez was scanning frantically through his datapad. According to the old xenological texts, eternal worms are supposed to be pristine beings. Their scales naturally shed and renew themselves. Their bodies process energy from cosmic radiation and stellar emissions. They shouldn't need to eat, sleep, or eliminate waste like biological creatures. But if this one has been in a state of severe depression for 3,000 years, the normal biological processes would have continued, but without the conscious will to maintain hygiene or proper energy processing, Sarah finished. It's like it's been slowly drowning in its own biological functions. The dragon's mental voice returned, weaker now. "Your species. I remember when you first reached for the stars. Such hope, such determination. You believed you could conquer the universe through sheer force of will and ingenuity. Most species that achieve space travel become cautious, conservative. They learn to fear the vastness, the emptiness. But humans looked at the impossible and declared it merely difficult." Sarah felt a spark of an idea forming. "You've been alone here for 3,000 years. What if we helped you clean up? Not just the physical mess, but maybe find a reason to care again?" The dragon's eye narrowed. And for a moment Sarah feared she had offended the ancient being. But then she detected something she hadn't expected. Curiosity. "You would do this? You understand what you offer? This chamber, the accumulated filth and waste of 3 millennia. It would take enormous effort to cleanse. And for what purpose? I am eternal, little human. In a few decades, you will be dust, and I will still be here, still alone. Maybe, Sarah said, her voice growing stronger with conviction. But maybe not. Maybe in those few decades we can remind you why existence is worth maintaining. Maybe we can help you remember what it felt like to care about something beyond your own suffering. She turned to her crew. What do you think, people? We've got salvage equipment on the Wanderer's Hope. Industrial cleaners, atmospheric processors, biological waste converters. If we're going to do this, it's going to be the biggest cleaning job in galactic history. Lieutenant Rodriguez grinned behind his helmet visor. Captain, I've been in the service for 12 years, and I've never backed down from a challenge yet. Besides, how many people get to say they gave a bath to a creature older than human civilization? Engineer Patel nodded enthusiastically. The ship's waste processing systems can be adapted for large-scale environmental restoration. And if this creature's biology is anything like what the old texts describe, once we get the cleaning started, its own natural processes might kick in to help maintain the progress. Dr. Martinez was already making notes on his datapad. This could be the greatest xenobiological rehabilitation project ever attempted. We're talking about not just cleaning a creature, but potentially helping restore the mental health of a being that's existed since before Earth had complex life forms. Sarah looked back at the dragon, whose great eye was still fixed on her with that faint spark of curiosity. What do you say, Zephyrian? Will you let us try? The pause stretched for long moments, and Sarah began to wonder if the ancient creature had simply lost interest in the conversation. But finally, the mental voice returned, and this time there was something different about it. A tiny note of hope buried beneath millennia of despair. Very well, small human. You may attempt your impossible task, but know that you undertake something that has defeated the passage of time itself. This shell has not known cleanliness for longer than your species has possessed written language. I do not believe you can succeed, but I confess I am curious to see you try. As Sarah and her crew began making plans for what would undoubtedly be the most unusual mission of their careers, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to embark on something far more significant than a simple cleaning operation. They were about to attempt to heal a wound that had festered for 3,000 years, to restore hope to a being that had watched the universe grow cold around it. The dragon's massive form shifted slightly, the first voluntary movement it had made in centuries, and Sarah took that as a good sign. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they had at least succeeded in awakening Zephyrian's curiosity. Now they just had to prove that sometimes the impossible was merely something that hadn't been attempted with enough determination and human stubbornness. The ancient eternal worm was about to learn what it meant when humans decided something needed fixing. The next 72 hours aboard the Wanderer's Hope were a whirlwind of planning, preparation, and increasingly creative problem-solving. What had started as a simple salvage mission had transformed into the most ambitious restoration project any of them had ever attempted. Captain Sarah Chen stood in the ship's main engineering bay, surrounded by equipment that had been hastily repurposed for their unprecedented task. Industrial atmospheric processors hummed alongside biological waste converters, while chemical synthesis units worked overtime to produce specialized cleaning agents that could handle 3 millennia worth of accumulated filth. Captain, I've finished the environmental analysis of the habitat chamber, reported Dr. Martinez, his face pale as he reviewed the data on his tablet. It's worse than we initially thought. The atmospheric composition inside is 60% nitrogen, 35% various organic decomposition gases, and the remaining 5% is a mixture of methane, ammonia, and compounds I don't even have names for. Engineer Patel looked up from his modifications to the ship's waste processing system. The good news is that our atmospheric processors can handle the gas mixture. The bad news is that we're going to need to create a completely sealed environment suit system. The biological contamination levels in there would be lethal to humans within minutes. Sarah nodded grimly. What about the physical cleanup? How are we going to move 3,000 years of, well, everything out of there? Lieutenant Rodriguez had been working on tactical logistics and spoke up from his position near a pile of modified mining equipment. I've been thinking about this like a military operation, Captain. We need to approach this systematically, zone by zone. The mining drones can be programmed for precision removal of solid waste materials, and we can use the cargo transporters to move everything to the ship's industrial recycling systems. Dr. Martinez pulled up a three-dimensional scan of the habitat chamber on the main display. Look at this cross-section analysis. The deepest layers of accumulated material are nearly 2 meters thick in some areas. We're essentially going to be conducting an archaeological excavation of biological waste. The bottom layers date back to when this creature first arrived at the station. Sarah studied the display with fascination and growing determination. So we're not just cleaning up 3,000 years of neglect, we're literally digging through geological layers of this creature's existence. Your enthusiasm is perplexing, came Zephyrian's mental voice, drifting through their minds like a whisper from across the void. I have observed your species' preparations with growing bewilderment. You approach this impossible task with the same fervor that other species reserve for matters of life and death. Sarah activated the communication system they had rigged to allow easier conversation with the dragon. Maybe that's because this is a matter of life and death, just on a different scale than most species think about. You've been dying inside for 3,000 years. Just because your body can't stop functioning doesn't mean your spirit hasn't been slowly suffocating. The pause that followed was longer this time, and when Zephyrian's mental voice returned, there was a note of something that might have been surprise. You speak of spirit as though it were a measurable quantity. Your kind's tendency to assign emotional significance to purely biological functions continues to puzzle me. Yet, I confess that your preparations have stirred something within me that has been dormant for many centuries. What you call hope, perhaps. Engineer Patel had finished his modifications and was now running diagnostic tests on the enhanced atmospheric processing units. Captain, we're ready to begin Phase 1. The sealed environmental suits are equipped with their own air recycling systems, and I've programmed the mining drones for gentle removal operations. Dr. Martinez has prepared a series of biological neutralizing agents that should break down the organic matter without harming the dragon's natural scale structure. Sarah looked around at her crew, noting the mixture of determination and nervous energy that filled the room. They were about to attempt something that no human had ever tried before: the complete environmental restoration of a sentient being older than their entire species. All right, people. Let's make history. The actual entry into the habitat chamber was like stepping into an alien world that had been forgotten by time itself. Even through the advanced filtration systems of their environmental suits, Sarah could sense the overwhelming weight of millennia. The air was thick and viscous, with a quality that seemed to resist their movement through it. Zephyrian's massive form dominated the center of the chamber, and up close, the true extent of the neglect became staggeringly apparent. What they had initially mistaken for discolored scales were actually layers upon layers of shed skin, dried organic matter, and accumulated detritus that had built up over the centuries. The dragon's natural white coloration was completely hidden beneath the accumulation. "Dear God," whispered Engineer Patel over the comm system. Look at the scale of this. The creature's actual body is probably 3 or 4 meters smaller in diameter than what we're seeing. All of this is just build-up. Dr. Martinez was taking biological samples with a specialized collection unit. The interesting thing is that this organic matter isn't decomposing normally. The dragon's natural bioelectric field has somehow preserved it all in a kind of suspended state. We're looking at 3,000 years of perfectly preserved biological history. Sarah approached the dragon's massive head, noting that even the creature's eyes were partially obscured by a film of accumulated matter. "Zephyrian, we're going to start with the surface layers. This might feel strange at first." "Proceed, small human." I have not felt physical sensation beyond the weight of my own neglect for longer than I care to calculate. Perhaps it will be interesting to experience something new. The mining drones began their delicate work, their precision manipulator arms carefully peeling away layers of accumulated material. The process was painfully slow, but gradually, patches of the dragon's true scales began to emerge. Where the cleaning agents had done their work, the revealed surface gleamed with an almost ethereal white radiance. "Captain, look at this!" called Dr. Martinez excitedly. "As we remove the accumulated matter, the dragon's scales are beginning to regenerate their natural luminescence. It's like we're uncovering a work of art that's been hidden for millennia." The work was exhausting and meticulous. Each section had to be carefully cleaned, treated with neutralizing agents, and then allowed to dry before moving to the next area. The crew worked in rotating shifts, with each person spending no more than 6 hours at a time in the contaminated environment. But as the days passed, something remarkable began to happen. Not only were they revealing the dragon's natural beauty, but Zephyrian himself began to participate in the process. At first, it was just small movements, a slight adjustment of a wing to allow better access to a particularly difficult area, or the tensing of muscles to help shed loose material. I had forgotten, the dragon's mental voice murmured during their third day of work. I had forgotten what it felt like to be clean, to have my scales respond to stellar radiation, to feel the natural energy flows of my body functioning as they were meant to. Lieutenant Rodriguez was operating one of the larger cleaning units, working on the dragon's enormous wing membranes. "You know what's amazing? As we clean each section, you can literally see the creature's life returning. The scales aren't just getting cleaner, they're getting brighter, more responsive." Sarah was working on a particularly challenging area near the dragon's neck, where centuries of accumulated matter had formed what was essentially a biological sedimentary rock. "It's like we're not just cleaning a creature, we're performing a resurrection." The breakthrough came on their 5th day of work. They had cleared approximately 30% of the dragon's body surface, revealing vast areas of pristine, luminescent white scales that seemed to generate their own soft light. As Dr. Martinez applied a specially formulated cleaning solution to a section near the dragon's chest, something unexpected happened. Zephyrian suddenly lifted his massive head, muscles that hadn't moved purposefully in 3 millennia suddenly flowing with renewed strength. The dragon's eyes, now cleared of the film that had clouded them, blazed with an inner fire that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. "I can see," Zephyrian's mental voice rang with wonder and growing strength. "I can truly see for the first time I can feel my body responding to my will again." "How is this possible?" Dr. Martinez was frantically checking his readings. "Captain, the dragon's bioelectric output has increased by over 300% in the last hour. Its cellular regeneration processes are accelerating rapidly. Whatever connection exists between physical cleanliness and this creature's mental state, it's far more profound than we realized." Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes as she watched the ancient being slowly, carefully, begin to move with purpose for the first time in millennia. "Zephyrian, how do you feel?" "I feel," the dragon replied, and the simple statement carried the weight of eons. "For so long I existed without feeling, without caring, without any connection to the physical reality of my existence. But as you have cleansed my body, you have somehow awakened my spirit from its long slumber." The dragon carefully extended one massive wing, testing muscles and joints that had been motionless for 3,000 years. The movement was shaky at first, but grew stronger and more confident with each attempt. "Your species continues to amaze me," Zephyrian continued. When I first observed humans reaching for the stars, I dismissed you as another brief flicker of biological activity that would burn out in cosmic insignificance. But you do not approach problems as other species do. Where others see impossibility, you see merely a challenge that requires creative solutions. Engineer Patel had paused in his work to watch the dragon's movements. You know, Captain, I think we might be witnessing something unprecedented. Not just the physical restoration of this creature, but the restoration of its will to exist. Sarah nodded, understanding finally dawning on her. It's not just about the cleaning, is it? It's about proving that someone cares enough to try. For 3,000 years, Zephyrian has been alone with nothing but the evidence of his own neglect. We didn't just clean his body, we proved that his existence has value worth preserving. Precisely. Zephyrian's mental voice carried a warmth that hadn't been there before. You have given me something I had forgotten could exist. Hope. Hope that existence can have meaning beyond mere duration. Hope that even the longest loneliness can be overcome by the simple act of caring. The dragon slowly, carefully began to help with his own cleaning, using his renewed mobility to position himself better for the crew's work. What had started as a restoration project was becoming something far more profound, a collaboration between species separated by millions of years of evolution, united by the simple human conviction that every life was worth saving. As Sarah watched the ancient being's scales continue to brighten with each cleaned section, she realized they weren't just cleaning a dragon. They were proving that sometimes the greatest victories weren't won through force or technology, but through the simple refusal to give up on someone who had given up on themselves. 3 weeks after they had begun the impossible task, Captain Sarah Chen stood in the restored habitat chamber and marveled at the transformation that surrounded her. The space that had once been a tomb of neglect and despair now gleamed with ethereal beauty. Zephyrian the Eternal had been fully revealed in all his magnificent glory, his pristine white scales flowing like liquid starlight across his massive form. But the physical transformation, remarkable as it was, paled in comparison to the change in the dragon himself. Where once there had been a creature drowning in millennia of apathy, now there was a being radiating purpose and vitality. Zephyrian moved with fluid grace, his massive form coiling and uncoiling as he explored the chamber with what could only be described as joy. I had forgotten what it meant to feel the stellar winds against clean scales. Zephyrian's mental voice sang through their minds, carrying harmonics of wonder that made Sarah's heart soar. I had forgotten the simple pleasure of movement without the weight of accumulated shame. Dr. Martinez was taking final readings on his xenobiological scanners, his excitement barely contained as he reviewed the data. Captain, the transformation is beyond anything we could have predicted. The dragon's cellular regeneration rate has stabilized at levels that exceed even the theoretical capabilities described in the ancient texts. It's as if the cleaning process has fundamentally reset his biological systems. Engineer Patel was making final adjustments to the habitat chamber's environmental systems, which they had completely rebuilt during the restoration process. The atmospheric processors are maintaining perfect environmental balance now, and look at this. The dragon's own bioelectric field is actually contributing to the chamber's life support systems. He's actively helping to maintain the environment he lives in. Sarah watched as Zephyrian carefully tended to a small garden area they had established in one corner of the chamber. The ancient being's massive claws, which could easily crush starships, moved with delicate precision as he adjusted the position of growing plants to optimize their exposure to the artificial sunlight. Your species has taught me something profound, Zephyrian said, his attention still focused on the growing things before him. For eons, I believed that immortality was a curse, that eternal existence inevitably led to cosmic despair. But you have shown me that despair is not an inevitable consequence of time, but rather a result of disconnection from purpose. Lieutenant Rodriguez was reviewing their mission logs, documenting what would undoubtedly become one of the most studied xenological reports in galactic history. You know, Captain, when we started this mission, I thought we were just doing a good deed for a suffering creature. I never imagined we were about to revolutionize our understanding of consciousness and mental health on a cosmic scale. The transformation hadn't just affected Zephyrian's physical condition or even his mental state. As the dragon's health and vitality returned, his ancient knowledge and wisdom began to emerge from the fog of depression that had clouded it for 3 millennia. He shared stories of civilizations that had risen and fallen long before humans had evolved, of cosmic phenomena that science was only beginning to understand, of technologies and philosophies that could reshape galactic civilization. I have witnessed the birth of your species, Zephyrian told them during one of their evening conversations. I watched your ancestors discover fire, develop language, reach for the stars. But in all my eons of existence, I have never encountered a people who approach problems with such relentless optimism. Other species, when faced with an impossible task, calculate the odds and often decide not to attempt it. Humans look at impossibility and ask, "How can we make this work?" Sarah smiled at the observation. Maybe that's because we haven't been around long enough to learn proper caution. We're still young enough as a species to believe that anything can be fixed with enough effort and creativity. No, Zephyrian's mental voice carried absolute certainty. I have observed many young species. Youth alone does not create this quality. What you possess is something rarer, the ability to see suffering and respond not with analysis or philosophy, but with action. You saw my condition and immediately began planning solutions rather than contemplating the metaphysical implications of eternal despair. Dr. Martinez looked up from his readings. Zephyrian, may I ask you something? We've learned so much about eternal worm biology during this process, but there's something I don't understand. How did you allow yourself to remain in that condition for so long? Surely you possess the power to clean yourself at any time. The dragon's massive head turned toward the scientist, his ancient eyes reflecting depths of wisdom and pain. An astute question, young scholar. Yes, I possessed the power. But power without will is meaningless. I had lost the capacity to care about my condition, about my existence, about anything beyond the vast emptiness that time had become. It was not inability that trapped me in that state. It was the complete absence of any reason to change. But we gave you a reason? Sarah asked gently. You gave me more than a reason, Zephyrian replied. You gave me proof that care still existed in the universe. For 3,000 years, I believed I was utterly alone, that nothing in creation could possibly understand or value my existence. Your presence, your efforts, your refusal to abandon the task even when it seemed impossible. These things reminded me that connection between beings is possible across any gulf of time or difference. The dragon's massive form shifted as he turned his attention to a communication console they had installed to allow him easier contact with the outside galaxy. Over the past week, word of their success had spread throughout the galactic community, and dozens of research institutions, diplomatic corps, and even other eternal worms had attempted to establish contact. I have been in communication with others of my kind, Zephyrian announced, his mental voice carrying a note of excitement that Sarah had never heard before. They too have fallen into the despair that consumed me, scattered across the galaxy in various states of withdrawal and neglect. But your success here has given them hope. Several have already begun to seek out help from human crews. Engineer Patel straightened with surprise. Other dragons are asking for human cleaning services? More than that, Zephyrian's laughter was like distant thunder filled with starlight. They are asking to learn your methods of caring. You see, Eternal worms are functionally immortal, but we are not immune to psychological suffering. Over the eons, many of us have fallen into the same pit of despair that claimed me. But none of us understood that the solution was not to be found in cosmic philosophy or temporal meditation. It was to be found in the simple act of caring for physical reality. Sarah felt a profound sense of accomplishment wash over her, but also a growing awareness of the implications of what they had achieved. So this isn't just about cleaning one dragon. We've potentially discovered a treatment for cosmic-scale depression. Precisely. Your species has developed something that even beings who have existed since the universe was young had lost: the understanding that mental health and physical care are inseparably linked. You have proven that no being is too old, too powerful, or too far gone to benefit from simple, persistent care. Dr. E. Martinez was taking notes frantically. This could revolutionize our understanding of psychology, xenobiology, and even philosophy. The idea that purpose and meaning can be restored through caring action rather than contemplative analysis, it challenges fundamental assumptions about consciousness and mental health. Zephyrian extended one massive wing, and Sarah was amazed to see that he had somehow crafted small perches along the wing membrane where the crew could sit comfortably. "There is something I wish to show you," the dragon announced. "A gift, in recognition of what you have given me." As the crew settled themselves on the offered perches, Zephyrian's form began to glow with an inner radiance that grew steadily brighter. Sarah felt a sensation of movement, but not through space, through something far more fundamental. Suddenly, they were no longer in the habitat chamber. They floated in a space that seemed to exist between dimensions, surrounded by swirling currents of pure energy and light. In the distance, Sarah could see stars being born, galaxies forming and evolving, the vast dance of creation that played out across cosmic time. "This is how eternal worms truly travel," Zephyrian explained, his mental voice now carrying harmonics that spoke directly to their souls. "We do not move through space so much as we move through the underlying structures of reality itself. I am showing you this because I want you to understand the magnitude of what you have accomplished." The view shifted, and suddenly they were looking down upon countless worlds, countless civilizations, all connected by threads of light that pulsed with the rhythm of life itself. "Every act of caring creates connections that transcend time and space," Zephyrian continued. "What you did for me was not just an isolated act of kindness, it was a fundamental alteration in the structure of reality itself. Your caring has created ripples that will spread across the galaxy for eons to come." Sarah watched in wonder as she saw the threads of connection spreading outward from their small actions, touching other eternal worms, inspiring new forms of care and healing across dozens of species and civilizations. Other ancient beings who had withdrawn from existence are beginning to emerge from their isolation. Young civilizations are learning that power and wisdom without care lead only to emptiness. Your species is teaching the galaxy that true strength comes not from the ability to endure suffering, but from the willingness to heal it. The vision faded, and they found themselves back in the habitat chamber. But Sarah knew that the experience had changed them all. They had seen their actions from a cosmic perspective, understood that sometimes the smallest acts of caring could reshape the fundamental nature of reality itself. "So what happens now?" Lieutenant Rodriguez asked. "Do we go back to our regular salvage missions and pretend this never happened?" Zephyrian's massive head moved in what Sarah realized was the dragon equivalent of a gentle smile. "Now, young explorers, you continue to be what you have always been. Humans who see suffering and choose to act. But you do so with the knowledge that your caring has cosmic significance. I will not return to the isolated existence I maintained before. Instead, I will travel the galaxy, seeking out others who have lost their way in the vast darkness between stars. And I will tell them about a small crew of humans who proved that no being is beyond help, no situation too hopeless to improve, and no act of caring too small to matter. Sarah felt tears of joy flowing freely as she realized the full scope of what they had accomplished. They had not just cleaned a dragon, they had reminded the universe that caring was the most powerful force in creation. Your species calls this humanity. Yeah, I believe, Zephyrian said with unmistakable amusement. And for the first time in my eternal existence, I understand why that phrase resonates across the galaxy. You do not simply endure the universe, you improve it. As the Wanderer's hope prepared to depart the research station, now transformed into a beacon of hope and healing, Sarah looked back one final time at Zephyrian. The ancient dragon stood proudly in his restored chamber, his scales blazing with renewed purpose, ready to begin a new chapter of existence dedicated to spreading the lesson they had learned together. Sometimes, the greatest victories were won not through conquest or technology, but through the simple human conviction that every life was worth saving, every being deserved care, and every problem could be solved with enough determination and compassion. The galaxy would never be the same.